All right, everybody. So we are just about to the end of our Warhammer the Old World role-playing game, kind of trial one-shot, I guess you could say. So I'm not too happy with the system in the end. I think there are some fundamental problems that need to somehow be addressed. I don't know exactly how they're going to want to fix this stuff, but I don't think that the game is in a good state right now. So I can't even really say like, oh, I'm waiting for a good module, or I'm waiting for this, or I'm waiting for that. There's just certain things that didn't vibe well with my group. I have typical D&Ders. Um, I would say I do not have crunchy players. Um, I have players that can crunch, but they generally like to role play. Um, I have a few that try hard to understand the systems that they're playing, and then I've got a few that just kind of go with the flow. Okay, so I think this is a fair trial for a system. It's not, like I say, I do not have a sweaty group. So if you think the problems I have are sweaty problems, I'm telling you, these are typical kind of players. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to get out of the way is why don't I just house rule it, right? Like, hey, come on, dude. Um, the problems you have sound like they could be easily house ruled. So the first point, I'm trying to evaluate the system, how it was designed, not how I would change it. And I always feel extremely strongly about that because I've had people, so for example, D&D 5th edition, the first one, I don't know what it is, 2011, 2014, something like that, they call it now. Excellent system. I really like it. Um, it stuck around for so long because people liked to play it. Uh, the people I know that hate the system house ruled it before they even played a game. And now they're playing some weird freaking amalgam that they created, and they're no game designers, and the players don't like it, and they think the system sucks, so they move on. I'm always afraid of that happening. Um, and I ran into it a lot when D&D 5th first came out. It was a lot of Pathfinder players at the time, and a lot of those came over from 3.5. But it was a lot of Pathfinder players, and they were just angry about different things like, oh, I want to be able to tame more animals. I want my animal companion to be stronger, which I think was a fair criticism. Um, but just different things. So they would house rule it before they even tried the system, and that's something I've never liked. I'm trying to evaluate this as a system. And the next point here, I could always play something else. Um, I play a lot of different game systems. I've tried a lot of different game systems. So what I'm thinking is, why would I continue on with a system that I constantly have to patch and band-aid and fix, and I'm probably not making it any better, um, when I could just play another system, right? And keep in mind, there's always a possibility I'm understanding the system wrong. Uh, for example, like for combat, it still seems strange to me that there is nothing to restrict somebody from changing zones. Um, like basically nothing. I have to put it there as a DM, and I just don't see a reason to do it. Like if the encounter is that mounted knights are going to be charging the players and kind of hit and running the players, why would I put a bunch of hazards for horses in the zones near the players? Um, I wouldn't. So that's like a couple of rounds where these horses are probably going to get to have free reign. I did put heavy undergrowth on the map in that scenario. This is a real scenario that happened, but the players just never thought to run into the brush. And I've got some equestrian players, like some actual players that do horseback riding and horse training and stuff like that, and trail rides. So it's not like this is some hidden information or some hidden lore that maybe they could run deep into the forest. It would be harder to, it would slow the horses down. It would make it difficult for them. Um, but they just didn't care to engage with that system. But anyway, all I'm trying to say is the way the system's set up, and this is the thing I was so staggered by, is there's even a talent that says, the talent says in it, you can move through opponent spaces without penalty. But everywhere I've looked, there is like no penalty for being in an opponent's space. I think I looked at hazards in difficult ground, movement, giving ground. The only penalty is, I think, if you give ground to a zone with an enemy in it, you take a wound, which is a big deal in some cases. But I couldn't find anything that said you can't just walk straight past an enemy, which makes sense for zones. Um, but that really takes the wind out of combat. Whereas you compare to a system like Soulbound, you have actions pre-set up in Soulbound to prevent somebody from entering a zone, to protect somebody in a zone, right? Like if you've got your squishy wizard in the zone with you, I could take an action to defend him to prevent people from just walking in and killing him. Right now, I guess you could just have a super nice DM, but there is no reason. I mean, like if some knights see a wizard trying to cast a spell, they're going to kill him. And that's kind of what I saw in the game. There's no way to prevent that, except maybe with the improvise action, right? So, don't like it. But anyway, I don't even remember why I got on that tangent. But the bottom line is, it doesn't make sense to patch a game that I feel like I could just play a different system. Thematically, I can easily port the theme of this game into Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, or Dungeons and Dragons, or Soulbound. I can easily port the idea of you've uncovered a plot, and if you don't solve this mystery, you're going to be killed, right? So you got to look at how the system stands on its own, and I don't like it. And in case that wasn't clear, this is a critical review of the system. We were not happy with it. The other reason I do not house rule is I used to run a lot of games for strangers. When I was in the Army, when I was in college, when I had a gaming store I would frequent, you would constantly be just, oh, we've got several hours or something like that, or we get a few days where we're going to have a lot of downtime, or, this is this group of friends or whatever. You would frequently have to run games for people that were complete strangers. And it is unfair. I have seen this. This has happened to me, and I've seen this where either a new player or me being new to a group, I show up with a character, and then I find out, oh, necromancy is not allowed. Or, oh, we don't allow classes from that book. Or, oh, you're a wizard. Well, you have to understand, we added skill checks to the spells. So not only do you have to pass a skill check, which is very difficult, to cast the fireball and use the slot, but the enemies get a save against the fireball. Um, it's very frustrating. Or like, you get into combat and let's say you made your character, but you don't know that there's 16 different house rules to make melee characters more powerful, but none of them assist your build or whatever. It's just very frustrating, and I think especially for a new player, it fucks them up pretty bad. They just get confused, and what I see is they just check out. They stay for the laughs, they stay for the fun, but generally speaking, they have no idea what's going on the table, and they check out. Um, and I just mentioned that. Another thing I hate is players show up with house rules in mind, and they get so upset when you don't use the house rule. Like they throw a tantrum. And I use $500 on free parking in Monopoly. Right. If you think of Monopoly, Monopoly is actually kind of a decent game, I think, when you just play it straight. That's one of the reasons I love um, Monopoly video games as compared to playing in person, because a lot of the stuff is fast and automatic, and you don't have all these stupid house rules. And for a long time, the really early ones, you couldn't even have them. Like you couldn't even put in $500 on free parking. But that's neither here nor there. And then the last point I make is I used to run a lot of 3.5. I never fell for this, but I would see DMs fall for it all the time, or I'd have players come up to me sheepishly trying to suggest a freaking house rule or an interpretation, and I always used to just say no. No. So tell me this, DM. In your mind, when I read this ability, it says blah 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 blah. And they usually bait you with something stupid, right? Like when I understand the trip action, I'm just trying to make sure I don't get victimized by trip, DM. I just want to make sure you know how it works. I'm getting off topic, but the bottom line is I don't do house rules. I don't do them for any system. I expect the game designers to make a system I want to play, period. End of story. That's it. Game designer, if you didn't make a system I want to play, I'm not going to play it. That's just the bottom line. I improvise. I come up with stuff on the fly. I'll come up with like, oh, that's not the game rules, so I'll make up something for you to do. Right? That's just basic DM craft. Tanner, what are you doing? Come on out of there. I don't know what you're fooling around with, but I don't want it. You want that ball? I'm about to put you in your crate if you can't settle down. All right. But as far as why I didn't house rule any of this stuff, I'll play a different system. That's what I'll do. I can very easily take the stuff that I like, which almost none of it is the system, and go from there. That said, let me just say, Cubicle 7, please keep innovating. You have some amazing systems. You have some fun games. I love trying them. And then certain elements don't work, but usually you improve them over time. I like that I have an option to play that's not freaking GURPS, that's not, like World of Darkness, that's not fucking Powered by the Apocalypse, which I hate, and which is not D20. So I've got criticisms for this system. If anybody that matters ever sees this video, please think of two things I would ask for, and I should try to repeat this at the end of the video because this is going to be rambling. Two things I would ask for is one, if I got it wrong, try to figure out why I got it wrong and make it more clear in the rules, right? I read this stuff thoroughly, and when I saw something that looked wrong, I said, hey, I'm sure that that's wrong, and I'm wrong about it. So let's figure out why it's wrong, right? Like, or I felt like I looked thoroughly for it. So like I say, if I got it wrong, please don't just dismiss what I'm saying. Imagine that other people are going to get it wrong as well, okay? Number two, think of how you're going to patch this stuff up. All right, you did game patches in Winds of Magic and Up in Arms for Warhammer Fantasy. I'm certain you can come up with something for this system, and I think this could be a good system. I like a lot of the stuff felt great on paper, by the way. When I read the system, and if you look at the early stuff, I was very excited for the system. And some of the things I thought would be a problem really weren't. And some things that I thought would be great ended up being huge issues. So let's move on. All right, so this is kind of a summary. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but this is the vibe that our players got. So the players were bought into the story, but they were kind of fighting the system. Lores are interesting, but the cost of getting a new lore is too high. Combat felt flat. Small dog, unironically, is one of the best combat assets in the game, I would say. Maybe there's better, but the small dog is so powerful. I was kind of excited about the clue system, but it's not really working for my group. This is a minor point. The setting's a little confusing for people that aren't like experts in Warhammer lore, but are familiar with Warhammer lore. And the skill system's screwed up. It needs work. It needs serious work. All right, so the players were bought in. So my players were engaged and interested. They were actually extremely excited. They got off some very interesting rolls and some very interesting stuff at the beginning, and they really felt like they were accomplishing some special stuff. And even ribbon skills. Like my wife has the talent Golden Voice. So Golden Voice lets her like do a lot of mimicry, and it's really kind of one of those stupid ribbon talents, but she has managed to do a lot with it. When she actually is like, okay, I'm gonna have to use my Golden Voice, and this is what we're going to try and do. And even though her skills are very poor, she's been lucky and succeeding many of her roles with it. So here's the thing is my campaign nearly died because I needed to do a downtime. So right after the second session, I felt like we were at like a fairly good pace, but I knew I had read how progression worked, and I was like, I have to have a downtime after session 3. The players are going to be having issues if we do not have a downtime after session 3. So we so I kind of I'm kind of railroading them into, hey, get out of there. What are you doing? Come on out of there. Dog screwing around. I railroaded them into a situation of, okay, you have to get help from somebody that doesn't believe you, which was part of the setup, by the way. I used, hey, hang on, let me put this dog away. I don't know what your problem is, Tan, but he's trying to get into the wires under my desk, and he frequently will kick out a wire or a power cable. So I'm just going to have to put him in this crate until I'm done. All right, so I railroaded them into a situation where, so the scenario I ran is essentially the players start the game captured by beastmen. A ritual happens that essentially infects all the people present with a blight, and then the beastmen let the players escape. And what happens is the beastmen send a watcher to keep an eye on the players, and they are supposed to not be trusted. The people are supposed to be like, you're full of crap. There's no beastmen. You're an idiot. which is frustrating because they had pretty good proof that there were beastmen. uh, but what happens is time is supposed to elapse, like a lot of time, and the other people with them are supposed to die and spread a blight throughout the town, and it's kind of revealed that they are going to cause the blight. So I was like, okay, I have to have a downtime to show the blight spreading. Otherwise, they've got nothing to do, right? Like they've got nothing to do if nothing's happening. Like they just have this mysterious figure following them, which for me was difficult because it was it was a little hard for me to prevent that guy from just being killed. Right? I think he was supposed to be this mysterious figure that was always kind of watching in the background, but was like anytime they came after him, he was gone. Um, Eventually, my players did ambush him and kill him, and that got the attention of the town watch. Oh, but let's go back. So I'm not here to summarize the story. Anyway, I took the pressure off so the players could have a downtime so they could increase their skills. And what happened is, so I explained to them how it worked. I was basically like, okay, guys, you basically just want to improve a skill. That's all you want to do. That's the only way you're going to get anything of value out. The coins are basically worthless. You guys have a silver character here. She can buy you an infinite amount of stuff at copper coinage. So you guys don't need coins. Like it's just pointless. You guys don't owe anybody anything, so you don't have to waste. You don't have to waste endeavors. So the only one that really matters is improve a skill, because improve a skill will give you an advancement pip no matter what. Well, one of the players, unfortunately, was kind of like, oh, I really want to learn Lore Beastman. So he spent all of his endeavors on learning Lore Beastman, which he did. But I could tell he had a bad taste in his mouth when he saw the other player's skills increasing and he realized he couldn't do anything. Like his character just, he could spend his like 3 XP or whatever he had to do like a minor improvement of an attribute, but he really couldn't do anything of value. And the players, like once they seemed to see how like the skill advancement worked, I think a lot of their heat for the system kind of died down, and we missed a few sessions, and it looked like we might not continue the campaign. So the next thing, the clue system's not really working out for me. I had high hopes for the clue system. So the clue system is you give somebody a clue. You just say, this is the clue, but you don't give them any direct information about it. And the players, through doing skill checks and things, will be given inferences. Like, here's a broken door. The clue is the broken door, right? It would take a skill check to realize the door was broken from the inside. So this was something escaping, and they would have to do a skill check to remember, like, oh, Lord Denethil did not want anybody coming down into the basement. So he probably knows what was down here, so on and so forth. What happened to us, and this is a little more unique to me, so I feel very strongly that I hate making players do skill checks to negate what they've just accomplished, okay? Because all it does is it says to the player, oh, don't do that cool thing you just did. Don't invest in this game at all, because it's designed for you to be able to fail that skill check and still excel. And what happened is, as soon as I started giving, or when these guys got a clue, They were just discussing it amongst themselves and all the information they already gathered, and they deduced accurately what was happening. So I, have a DM, have a choice. They were paying attention in the game. They remembered what was going on. They understood their position in the world, and they were able to figure out what the fuck was going on. Do I want to punish them? Right? Do I want to say, "Oh, wow, you guys actually paid attention in the game, figured out what was going on, and correctly deduced what was happening, and you have an extremely good working theory." Do I want to force them to make rolls that, by the way, in this system, you can't fudge a player roll, right? Like in Dungeons and Dragons, unless somebody rolls a natural one, you can always just say, like, oh, no, you passed. Like the DC was a 5 or some shit like that. You know, it's very rare that they roll something like a 2 and their bonuses are so low they don't roll at least a 5. Or, you know, because like the DC is hidden usually, right? Like the DC is something that they're not going to know. And I, as the DM, know. And so potentially, like I could maybe like make them roll, say in Dungeons and Dragons or a game like that, and then just say, "Oh no, you actually succeeded." But something like Soulbound or Warhammer Fantasy or this game, the player roles are kind of like unfudgeable. The player instantly knows whether they succeeded or whether they failed when they roll their dice. So it puts you in a situation where two things can happen, and I don't like either. I've done both, and I hate them both, which is either you make them roll, they fail. They got everything right. So you can either gaslight them, you can either trick them into thinking that they were actually wrong, that their inferences were wrong, or you can just say, okay, just pretend to be stupid. You got it in one. You figured it out, but your character doesn't know. And I don't want you to act as if your character knows, because effectively, you don't know. You don't want to metagame it. And I prefer that, by the way. I prefer the player just continues on and just accidentally finds the truth because the player knows the truth. But I have, it causes problems at the table. The other players get angry about it for some reason. They're like, oh, don't metagame. It's like, well, do you want to have 10 more sessions of you trying to figure out what he's already discovered? Like, I don't know. Not happy with it. They figured it out on the clues. All the clue system really does is it means, like, if they can't figure it out, this is just a formal system of them rolling to figure it out. So I didn't like that. Players were not happy with the combat system. This isn't me as a snobby DM. The players were not happy. And then I've got a player that's really upset. He did not burn a fate when he had his knee shattered, because I think he did not understand how. And I'll be honest, I didn't understand at the time how big of a problem it was until after the session. Like, we knew it was a big injury, but it looked like they were going to be taking bigger injuries soon, like fatal injuries soon. So, I didn't sit there and have the talk with him like, you need to burn a fate to ignore this injury. Because the way the combat was going, it really looked like they were going to start taking worse injuries. And, I didn't have the wherewithal to say, oh, wait a minute, this injury is a rest and recovery injury. You cannot heal it. And I'll take a look at the healing in case I missed something, but they're not going to have a downtime for the rest of this one shot. Meaning, he's basically permanently crippled, and he knows it, and it's pretty disappointing. In fact, the players are in a position where they want to escape on horses. He can't frickin' ride a horse with a shattered knee, because he's permanently got prone inflicted, and the prone's going to make him fall off the horse. So I don't know what we're going to do. What I'm probably going to do is I'm going to give that player an opportunity to just burn a fate because we didn't understand the weight of the shattered knee when it happened. But it's crippling. All right, so lores. This is a system I was very excited for. So the idea with a lore is if you have a lore, you pretty much just are almost like an expert in that field. Like it's not automatic, but I was kind of treating it as automatic. Like if you've got lore Talagod, you just knew the city. You knew the city well. You knew where to go. You didn't really need to do skill checks to find, so and so's house, or if it was well known, or find lodging, or this or that, or get a discount on something, or go to a straight dealer or something like that. I just let you have it. I really liked the system because it kind of stovepiped what people knew, right? Like it wasn't vague like lores where it's like, oh, well, I'll just make sure to take a single point in a bunch of different in every lore that I can so that I always have a shot at knowing something about this. Um, and it tells you what you can and can't do. So if you don't have lore literacy, you can't read and write. So here's the thing though, it screws up character progression. And like I was saying earlier, you need a good number of successes to learn a lore. My player was not able to do it in one endeavor. It took two. And that is two, I guess, two situations where you can't. I forget what learning a lore does. It's I think it's a recall test. So basically, that's two endeavors out of his three maximum that he has to be testing recall in order to gain a lore. Um, and what ended up happening is he gained his lore, but he got lore beastmen because they're dealing with beastmen. That is extremely useful lore for the party, helps them out immeasurably. But it was a huge sacrifice for him. His character is now significantly worse off than everybody else's character, progression wise. It just feels like it was too big of a sacrifice. I felt like, the players feel it. By the way, the players like really can tell. The guy that got his melee up is hitting a lot better, way stronger in combat. The character that got their shooting up is is doing real good stuff with the guns. But this poor guy, I mean, yeah, I've found ways to use the skills that he's got. And he's been doing well on that end because his recall leveled up. His recall is high. And he's got some other mental stats that are high. But as far as should be good for this game, but as far as when the combat happens, it's like they're a man down, but I'm counting him for balance reasons, and it gets difficult for a game runner because it's like, oh, I set these encounters up before the last downtime. Oh crap! X player and X player are basically NPCs for every combat now. Now all these combats are unbalanced. But I've got to throw them against the combat almost just to give me a chance to recognize what they can handle. So it's a little frustrating. But that said, literacy's a lore. I don't think anybody's going to take literacy. I think people are just going to, because it's more of a, I'll be straight, it's more of a burden on the DM, right? Oh, I want to give you a note. Well, I can't. I can't give you a note. Nobody can read it. So if I give you a note, we're going to have a mini adventure of you finding somebody that can read. And that's fun the first time. You do that once, that's pretty fun. But after that, it's just like, okay, well, we got to take it to so and so to read it for us. He's the only guy we know that knows how to read. And it can start just being an inconvenience, not just for the players, I think for the DM. Or, I had something simple, like I had a joke. Um, Lieutenant Danya's like little, like, freaking servant boy or whatever. Um, there's essentially a joke where one of my players was improving, and he's like, "Oh, let Lieutenant Danya know that the only man that could ever beat him at or beat them at Dragon Chess is sitting out here." And then, like, the guy comes out, he is clearly abused, and he's crying about Dragon Chess. That apparently Lieutenant Danya's never heard of Dragon Chess, and there's no such a game, and he's like really upset. Not at the lieutenant for hitting him, but at the player for tricking him into thinking there was Dragon Chess. So I don't know. I thought that was really funny. It's not necessarily that funny, but I just wanted him to have when he went to talk to the players again. I wanted him to have a sign on him that said "Ask me about Dragon Chess." But I realized the players are all illiterate, so like I can't do that joke, right? Um, and here's the thing: it's like I don't know of any scenario like as a DM. I could tease the players constantly with not being able to read, like, "Oh, dude, there's a plaque that says something, and there seems to be like a treasure you could have gotten had you been able to read the plaque, but too bad." But the reality is, it's just like you can't, as a DM, create an adventure that hinges on your players having literacy. And I don't think there's a very effective way to make them think like, "Oh man, if only I knew how to read, we would have got some kind of bonus or some crap." No, it's just a pain in the ass for the DM if everybody's illiterate. But I will say that's the sub point: is some DMs and some players have dreamed of illiteracy in Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, and now it's here for real. The complaint I see sometimes is it's too easy to learn to read and write, and so the fun of having illiterate players goes away very fast if it was ever there in the first place. Because a lot of I've found a lot of the classes, or it always felt like I had multiple players in a party of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay that could start out with literacy, to the point where somebody's always like, "Oh, I'll learn to read and write," and it's not the punishment that it is in the old world. By the way, taking literacy on a starting character instead of some other starting talent isn't that big a deal. That's one or at most two sessions away you could have gotten that talent. Whereas in this game, you're permanently putting your character backwards by taking the lore. So that's rough. I think the barrier is too high. Um, in Warhammer Fantasy, it's too low, right? I mean, because I think this is a fair scenario. I've had situations where players in Warhammer Fantasy have rescued a handgunner. Well, they saved the motherfucker's life and they're friends. Why wouldn't the handgunner train them in black powder weapons? I think that's perfectly fair, and it takes a thing, but it essentially means that that type of an act, which normally would be kind of meaningless in a typical game, suddenly means every character can use black powder weapons. Um, so sometimes, and then even if you don't have a scenario like that, if you just identify a trainer, it doesn't cost that much in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay to gain skills and talents. Now, usually, if I recall, for talents, there's like a role associated with it. That can be kind of a pain because you can fail that. But the barrier was very low in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Just to refresh, in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, you have a very strict job. That job dictates everything you're allowed to take normally. However, you can take endeavors to get other talents and other skills, and as long as you're willing to do it, it's pretty easy. But now I think the barrier is too great with the way that the lores are set up. Combat, I think, is in a strange place. I do not know what you can do about combat in this game. So every combat we had, and I put them against some hard combats. Their first combat in the game had a centaur brute and 3 chaos hounds, right? So it had a minion for each player. It was 3 players and a brute. The way I wanted the encounter to work was they were trying to outrun the centaur. Maybe they would kill the dogs. They're trying to outrun the centaur. So I set the map up so they could outrun the centaur. Like there was a bunch of stuff with like hazards and terrain and stuff that I did. And the players were just like, no, we're just going to fight the centaur. So I was like, okay, well, I'll let them fight him. And, they should see quickly that he's a tough enemy and it's probably better if they just get the heck out of there. No, they kicked the shit out of him. And then they took out the hounds as if they weren't there. Then I had another ambush scenario where they were ambushed and heavily outnumbered by what I considered stronger minions. And that was just a stagger fest. And just like in Warhammer the Old World, the tabletop game, giving ground is a shitty system that doesn't work. So one of the things that's fucked up with Warhammer the Old World, the tabletop game right now, the miniatures game, losing combat is an advantage. And it's just like, oh, thank God you beat my block of infantry. How lucky for me, because I get a free reform. Now whoever just did that to me is dead. Right? It's so stupid. But in this game, I don't like it because there was never a scenario where there was enough players to set up a situation where enemies would be forced to give ground into a zone with a player. So it was just like, oh, I've staggered him. Player 2 hits him, staggers him again. So he falls back a zone, he loses his stagger. Nothing's happened to him. He moved back a zone and he can charge again. And that's what was happening. And the players didn't really want to charge piecemeal because they get a bonus. You get a die bonus, which is kind of a big deal for outnumbering. So, okay, I could charge into where he fell back to, but now I'm outnumbered and I'm going to get screwed because I'm the end of the round and they're all going to get to gang up on me in that zone and I'm probably going to be dead. So I don't want to charge after him. I want to stay in my zone. So I'm going to pick a different target or whatever. The choices were really shallow. There was no real way to control enemies. Yes, the improvised action is there, and the improvised action, I guess, is supposed to do all the work, but there's nothing you could do. So that said, so the players basically just smashed the monsters, no problem, or it was just a stagger fest until they started being like, okay, we're all going to assist this player, and this player's just going to put a jumbo attack onto these monsters, and then they just wiped him out like it was nothing. But so knights, I had an encounter with 2 knights, and that was nearly a TPK. So the thing with a knight is when the knight charges, the Empire Knight, his charge is glorious. He gets like +1 dice, +1 damage on the charge. And on a horse, he gets +1 resilience. So his resilience is 7, which is, for this game, is very high. So these knights were just cycle charging the party and just wrecking them, right? Nearly killed them all. However, they managed to stagger a guy and get another stagger on him. And the rat catcher, I have a rat catcher, he has his dog, and he said, "Hey, doesn't my dog," I'm telling you, they're not really crunchy players, but he did remember, "Doesn't my dog do something when they're staggered?" I said, "Oh, yeah. He can force them to not give ground." So granted, this is retroactive because we all forgot about his dog asset, and it was probably going to be a TPK. He's supposed to command his dog when he attacks, okay? So he had just attacked, essentially. Technically, he still had time to command his dog to latch onto the horse or latch onto the knight. But it was a little bit retroactive. But I consider that fair. So the dog holds onto the horse so it can't give ground. So the guy chooses to go prone because he did have 1 wound, I think, at that time. So he couldn't take another wound. He would die. So he falls off his horse. Now suddenly he can't use his lance. I can't recall. I mean, he could still potentially do charge attacks, but now he's surrounded by the party. Can't use his lance. Lost to resilience, and now suddenly it's just a joke for the party. And they still were staggering him, but since the dog was holding him at that point, and I think he was already he ended up getting knocked. Somebody knocked it. Somebody staggered him again. Somebody made him give ground again, essentially. So he went prone, and then somebody staggered him again, and he had to take a wound and died. But I tell you, like the dog, if that player did not remember, oh, my dog is useful here, they'd have been killed. And then I've got another player that. So I don't know how I feel about this stuff here, okay? So my players are in a situation. Here's what's happened, okay? They went to the town watch. The town watch knows exactly what's going on now. These players are infected with a blight. They are the last ones with the infection. They believe that if they go and topple the herdstone where this happened, the blight will be cured for them. There is no telling if it's going to be cured for the city or not. This watch captain has decided that his goal is just to take the players out of the city, kill them outside of the city, which will probably get him and his men infected, which means they're kind of on a suicide mission. And they actually went ahead. They called ahead to these knights to attack the players. The players just killed the knights, and they were able to deduce that the guard captain is planning to kill them. And our next session is going to start off with them figuring out what they're going to do about the guards that are now getting ready to fight them. They're still heavily injured from their last encounter, but here's the thing. There is no way for them to go and get a downtime at this point. I mean, they have another combat they have to fight, or they have to find a way to flee from that combat. And then it's kind of a shady scenario. Like, how are you going to find a place to hide from the guard that wants you dead. Not only do the beastmen want you dead in the city, they want to capture you, get you back in the city, and kill you there if they have to. But because the beastman cover is blown now, right? They don't really have a reason not to just throw them back in the city and kill them if they can, and just go ahead and invade once they're there. But that's the problem, right? Is what's going to happen to this player? Like I say, I don't think the player necessarily made a bad decision by not burning a fate to prevent the knee shattering, but none of us knew the weight of it, and I don't think we really were like, oh, by the way, it's impossible for you to heal this within the scope of the adventure. Otherwise, he may have. I'm going to give him a chance to retroactively burn the fate. He may not want to, which I think is fine. It'll give us a chance to test. But think about if this happens in your scenario. You're seriously playing your scenario. The players are under pursuit by the evil, right? That's kind of the premise, is you're under pursuit by an evil that's relentlessly after you, that you really can't escape. How are you going to like hold up in a hospital for a month and not have something happen? So like I say, it's rough because everybody else will be able to recover from their injuries. Most of them just need a breather, and then we've got the other players have, instead of rest and recovery, they just have a night's rest for their bad injuries. So they just need a night's rest, but this player needs a freaking downtime that we're never going to be able to. I already know there's not going to be another downtime in this one shot. But imagine this is a real thing. It's like, okay, guys, if something doesn't happen at X time, the end of the world happens or whatever, and here's a cult that's constantly chasing you through this forest, and this guy shattered his knee. I guess it's his last stand. He's just dead. He's just a dead player. So I'm not sure if I like that. If you get any rest and recovery injury, you're basically a dead character. You might as well just last stand. And that could be what he's just planning to do. He's just going to be a last stand battery or something like that for when they need it. But yeah, I think the combat's too flat. I think it's just, there's not enough player options. And then it's very strange. It's like, I don't know that you could ever balance it, because I'll throw stuff at my characters that I think is going to be hard, and it's either a stagger fest or they just straight up stomp it. I throw something at the characters that I think will be challenging, and it's almost a TPK because there was math involved that was better than I thought it would be, and the defense stat for those knights were too high. The players basically couldn't hit them. So I don't like it. I can't say that I've play tested against 1,000 different enemies and the players really crunched their shit out. But I think we're dealing with more typical players, and they're not happy with it either. They're a little cantankerous. They actually prefer. I like the zone system, and you have to understand, this is the one thing I will say is I don't think zones are necessarily the problem. I think the combat options are the problem, because I have 2 of my 3 players are old Soulbound players, and they enjoyed the combat in Soulbound. I think it's as simple as there's like no defense action in this game, and there's also no metal. But this isn't a game where that makes sense to have. I think metal is kind of fun for players. It lets them attack again. Okay, yeah, and skills and progression not working for us. That's a typo. Even my non-crunchy players, I've gone on about this over and over again, even my non-crunchy players don't like the skill progression. Okay, XP can buy stats. XP can give you an extra die roll on the roll, but really, if you've got 3 or 4 dice, you're fine. You really need skill ups at that point. And I've got players rolling 5 dice and getting no successes, even on glorious. That sounds really unlucky, but when your stats at 2, you know, what are you supposed to do? And the system just does not make sense. It's like, okay, like you have to be so rigid with your downtimes because it's like, okay, we have 1 session, we have a downtime. We're only allowed 1 roll for the downtime. Oh, okay, well, we get into a dungeon, and this is one of my big problems, is your players want a downtime every 3 sessions. And even then, I think their skills are going to lag because that's kind of how the system's made. The system seems to be designed for you not to get skill ups. Which I don't know. I don't know that I like that at all. But, it really stretches things out for your characters. But this is kind of a hard-hitting system, and it moves pretty fast. I think it's better to treat this as like a disposable character system, like kind of more like Warhammer Fantasy. Like once you got enough money to open that tavern, you retire the character and you get a new one. Then to say, okay, you have to do, assuming you're playing once per month, and in a 1-month cycle, you would do 3 sessions in a downtime. And let's say you want something, let's say you want to become a 10 XP character. That's like a quarter of a year, right? Just I don't know. It just seems like it's a little too slow, but at the same time, it's like the XP isn't good enough, and you're just hard capped at a max of 3 endeavors per downtime. It makes it scary to go into a dungeon. Like this dungeon might take us 6, 7 sessions. I've had players stuck for months in dungeons. And it didn't matter because they weren't losing anything by being in the dungeon. These players would be gaining the same XP they would gain if they were just jerking off in town. And they are losing skill ups by being stuck in that dungeon. So I don't like it. And they're not going to gain permanent coins from it either, from the treasure. They might gain contacts or favors from contacts, but it's like I think the system in action is too slow, right? So think about this. I want Waxwing to be my good ally, and she sends me on a quest to get a book for her. Okay? Let's assume I have a downtime and she gives me the quest. That means I have 3 sessions to get the quest, get the book, get it back to Waxwing in town, and be at the point where I can have a downtime not to lose skill ups, to have gained something from that, which is Waxwing willing to help me. I'm telling you, the players figured out what was going on as soon as they got a downtime, and they are not crunchy players. They're not sweaty players. They don't like it. I don't like it either. I don't know what could be, I mean, this could be easily, I guess, house ruled. You can just say, oh, well, you get, God, I don't even know. You can change experience for endeavors or something. I don't know. You could just give the players more, or you could just say essentially you always get a number of rolls equal to the number of sessions you had. I think that would be a little bit more palatable for the players. But it's just like the system seems to put you in a situation where it's like, okay, if you play the system, if you get into an extended period where you can't have a downtime, your character is permanently getting weaker. Like players just don't like that. I know it's not that big of a deal. You might say, "Oh, but if you roll enough dice, it doesn't matter." Players just don't like it, and I don't really like it myself. I could see the disparity between the characters that focused on skills and the character that had to increase their lore. Don't like it. This is a very minor issue, and this is my last point, is the settings throwing people off. This has happened multiple times. Um, I have one player. I'm kind of lucky because I have one player who is kind of whatever, doesn't really get super into the setting, just looks at like the character in front of them, and they're just like, okay, this is the character I'm playing. This is how I'm going to do it. I have another player who just kind of goes off the rails. He's just like, I'm just going to invent my own special thing that I want to do, and that's fine. Okay. And I had another player that is very familiar with the lore, but he doesn't know the old world very well. And he was constantly getting disappointed, like, oh, I want to do this. I was like, well, you can't do that. Sorry, like that group doesn't really exist in in that capacity anymore. Oh well, I think this would be well. That doesn't work for the way the system is. You know, it's a little disappointing. I don't really have a problem with it personally because let's pull up our. Don't like leaving this open because I have something weird open. There we go. I wanted to see what my face looked like. But it just kind of threw people off. It just kind of threw off some of my players, and they were a little bit disappointed with the way things were going. Um, but that's minor, right? You just have to get used to a new setting. You just have to get used to a new game. Um, and I think that's the weakest criticism I have because it's not really a criticism, right? Like I want to be playing in the old world. I want to be playing in a new world. But it is something that happened, and I'm not sure. This is one thing, Cubicle 7. I don't think there's anything you can do about this complaint. The other ones, I think you can work out. I think they are real problems. I kind of wish this wasn't such a rambling video. I wish I put more direction into it and didn't go on so many tangents because it could potentially be helpful. Um, you could either, like I said, see where I went wrong and figure out why I might have made that mistake and then make it more clear in a rules revision. Or if I got it right, you might be able to find a way to fix it. Um, I think the easiest fix I could think of is I would probably make stat ups. I would make people's stats what could only be increased through endeavors, and I would let them purchase skills via experience. Um, I think that would fix it because a stat's really kind of like just like a nice bonus to have. I'd rather have 2 dice and 7 shooting than 7 dice and 2 shooting. Um, I mean, I guess the variability of that 2 shooting 7 dice maybe is better mathematically. I don't know, but intuitively, I just feel like that's where we're at. So it'd be nicer. I would rather just have fewer opportunities for attributes to go up, which, by the way, get prohibitively expensive. You got to think about it. If I want to get a 5 in a stat, I need 6 experience. That's a month and a half of sessions, right? Unless we do something great and we get the 1 bonus XP. That's a month and a half of sessions to get up to 6 dice. But I guess I just feel like you wouldn't feel the pinch of not being able to, like, losing skill ups. I don't. I like. I think it's probably best that endeavors are capped. Um, but I don't like how it restricts your skill ups in the way that it does. Or, oh, this scenario doesn't allow for a downtime, so the players just get worse. Or, okay, guys, we've had 3 sessions, now we have to have a downtime, and you better not do any of the other endeavors besides the skill one, otherwise you're going to get screwed over. Like, I just doesn't work for me. Combat, please just add some combat options. The first thing, we're talking non-crunchy players, first thing they ask is, well, how do I prevent somebody from getting to me? There's no way you can prevent somebody from getting to you. You could come up with something with the improvise option because they can always walk over to you. The only thing you can do is hope that I designed the map in a way for you to have like a freaking tree blind or something like that, where you can shoot everybody with your longbow with your impunity. But in reality, the longbow is a shitty weapon because the minimum range is too long. I mean, I think that kind of stuff is crap. And I don't think it was a good implementation of the zone. Like, seriously, just errata to add like more Age of Sigmar actions into the game. Or if I've got it so wrong and I'm telling you I searched, man, just make it more clear in the rules text. If it's a call out box, I somehow missed the call out box. Maybe it looked too much like a fluff piece, but just make it clear in the text. You can't move through a zone with another player in it. I mean, even that's not very helpful, though. I don't know. Like I say, I'm not a game designer. I just know I wasn't completely happy with the system. Players aren't happy with it. They're ready to move on. When I mentioned to them, oh, this is probably going to be the last session in this system's coming up. There may be max 2 more sessions in the system. Everybody breathed a sigh of relief. And I want to make this clear. It's not that they didn't like the game. They were bought in. They were bought in. They loved the scenario they were in. They loved the mystery they were solving. They seemed to like Warhammer the Old World once they kind of got into their heads. It's a new setting. But oh man, anytime that system shows up, it tended to just get in the way of like their passion for the game. And that to me is the mark of a bad system. Like I honestly, as screwed up as this sounds, I hate Powered by the Apocalypse. I think the players would be having a better time if I was running Powered by the Apocalypse. And that's bad news. And like I say, I could be getting it wrong, but if I'm getting it wrong, if I've read it wrong and all my players have read it wrong, and I knew there was something the matter with the way I was reading it and I was trying to find the correct ruling, something's wrong, right? So that's where we're going to leave it for now. We will finish up. The next game we're planning to check out is we're either going to go back in time to Soulbound. Well, I wanted to go back in time to Soulbound and run some of the big book modules. That system was so undersold. I feel like I am so disappointed that it was just kind of hobbled at the gate. I feel like they made so much good stuff for it. So like Ulfenkarn, I always thought was just a fluff book. It's actually like a whole setting for playing in Ulfenkarn. They have special Ulfenkarn characters that aren't soulbound and stuff like that. So you're basically playing like Cursed City, the RPG. It looks really cool. I had no idea. I had no idea. The book is sitting on my shelf, and since we weren't playing Soulbound at the time, I just never bothered to read it. But I was just reading through a lot of that old stuff, getting excited. Like I was reading Ruins of the Past, and I was like, oh, I'd love to run an adventure in this location, or I'd love to do this, or I'd love to do that. Uh, I have Shadows of the Mist on Foundry, and I kind of wanted to run it, but that's one of those funny modules where actually it was really like a collection of different modules in the city. And I don't know how excited I was for that. I may not be excited to run it, but I do have it. I also have Blackened Earth. I don't have it in Foundry, but I have it physical. I kind of want to run that. But what the players are excited for is Champions of Chaos, and I've got to say I am too. I am pretty pumped for Champions of Chaos. I already know what the problems of Soulbound are, and I think Champions of Chaos solves a number of them. I really feel like it does. So anyway, the players are excited. I'm excited. I'll have to do original content for it because nothing exists yet. There's no starter set or anything. And I don't think the book did what Old World did and give you the Dark Omens, where the Dark Omens that's what we're doing in this. We're doing one of the Dark Omens from the book, from the Game Master's Guide. And that, by the way, is good. Story-wise, the players are happy with what they're doing. They like the setting. They like what they're doing. But like their character, I mean, I don't know how to describe this. Their characters don't feel like distinct characters with an identity. It's like the rat catcher is actually just the guy with the spear, kind of, right? Somehow he's gotten so good with his spear. He's like the only one that really does any serious damage. Jen is the girl with the gun. Because the only thing that's of any effectiveness are her pistols. She basically gets 2 shots with her pistols, and then she's not doing much the rest of the combat. And then my other player is just like the extra guy, gives bonus dice and stuff. So, like I say, it's not really worth talking about too much. Some of the stuff is just, I don't know. I feel like this system was not play tested. I'm gonna be straight up with you, Cubicle 7. I don't think you play tested this system, or you play tested it and you were afraid to hurt the feelings of the person who had a lot of these ideas because they don't work. They just straight up don't work. So whatever. I'm here to do it, I guess. I don't know who these people are, and you don't know who I am, so I assume you're not going to stop selling products to me for being mean. But that's just the bottom line: is the system at its core, I think, doesn't work, and I don't think it. I think it's pretty fucking far off. Like for example, progression in Soulbound is not very good, but you have a functional character in Soulbound. So the reason the progression's so bad in Soulbound is people don't feel like they really need anything to progress after they get their skills leveled up enough. They don't feel the need to be like, oh, I've got to get my body up 1 more point or something like that. which they always can, and that's a huge XP dump. But I mean, generally, they're kind of happy with where they're at fairly with fairly little progression. And figuring out what talents they want to take is hard. But in this game, the characters do want progression. It's a little more like Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, where it's like my character is weak, and I do want to level up my character, but I simply can't. It's simply impossible for me to put my skills up. So I better close it out here. Like I say, it's probable that Cubicle 7 can fix a lot of this stuff. I think they just have to I think they have to take some of the flavor off. You know what I would say? I think for me personally, maybe make it so attributes have to be increased through endeavors. And I would not link it to what the endeavor is. I would just be like, oh, you've got a downtime. You just have 3 rolls at getting your attributes up. And you can use a similar system to skills or whatever. And I think that would be fine. And then just skills are purchased through XP. It's still going to be slow. It's still going to be a pain. But it's not a situation where we have now where, oh, we're going into this dungeon. Well, I guess my character is permanently weaker because we're trying to complete this quest. Yeah. All right. But I better sign off here. I better shut it up. Probably would have been better not to be so rambly. But you know, that's how the cookie crumbles. All right. If you guys have sat by and watched this, you know, I hope. I think my hope for you is 2 different things. One, if you want to get into this system, you know what my pain points are, and you will look through to see if I'm correct or maybe if I got something wrong. You'll be prepared. So you might want to preload your players with the idea that they need to do a lot with the improvise action. Or you might decide to just house rule the stuff. Maybe you'll try what I'm suggesting of stat points being the, and when I say stats, I mean like strength, ballistic skill, those type of stats. I forget what they call them, characteristics or attributes or something stupid. Like every game calls it something different. But just do your stat points on rolls and let the skills be XP. You know, it's so frustrating. It's such a bad leveling system in my opinion, because in some ways making skills XP will make it so your initial skills increase faster, but your later skills are going to go nowhere. Well, I guess that's what's happening anyway with the current system, really. I don't know. We will have to see. But like I say, I think the big thing for me is I really feel like my players were breathing a sigh of relief at the idea that we were not going to continue to play this system. They like the world, they like the story, they're into it. I don't think they like the system. The basic roles seem fine, but when it comes to progression, that's where I think it falls apart, and I think the combat just does not work. You know, and it's frustrating. It's like, hey, we just killed like a centaur. We just killed like an ambush of like 8 brigands. We just killed this. We just killed that. Now suddenly this opponent has a couple extra points in their defense and is holding a shield, and their resilience is just 1 point too high, and now he's invulnerable. are virtually invulnerable. You know, that's a crappy feeling. And there's no real way for you to know as a player if you're just getting a few unlucky rolls or if, you know, you just ran into an encounter you can't handle and you got to retreat. All right, well, I could ramble for hours, but it is time to just let her go. So, hope this was helpful to you. At this point, I would definitely wait for the starter box, and I might just get a starter box for your group if you haven't already bought these books. Um, and we'll see what they do there. And then, because there could be some other system stuff, like, I don't know. It's almost like they're trying to run Call of Cthulhu, right? This is almost like this is Warhammer Call of Cthulhu, but your characters are just way too strong. I don't know how to describe it. Like the system is like so flat that if you play with even the most minimum crunch of I'm just trying to outnumber an opponent in my square or in my zone, so I get +1 die, and occasionally we're going to do help actions to make one powerful attack. It feels like the players can beat anything. Um, so it's like, what are you? Are you Soulbound or are you Call of Cthulhu? You know, Soulbound's much more fun to play, but the idea is you're these great heroes, or you know, maybe more accurate would be. Well, I don't want to compare this to D&D because D&D, I like the gamey aspects of D&D. I think as a game, D&D is still one of the best RPGs there is, but I don't think it's a good role playing engine. I think games like Warhammer Fantasy are better role playing engines, and games like say Soulbound just have a completely different feel. But like I say, this doesn't feel like Warhammer Call of Cthulhu because the characters are too effective. It's very frustrating. Like in combat, they're effective, and actually, the enemy, like I'm talking about stats. Look, my players after 3 sessions outstat almost all the enemies. They just have better stats than they do. Like these knights that I'm making such a big deal about, they have, if you compare the ballistic skill and shooting of my road warden, their melee is worse. You know, and she's only had 3 sessions and a downtime. Like that doesn't seem right. Um, you know, by utilizing their speed better than she was, they were able to, because my players were just standing around. They got to the point where they were so unengaged from the combat, they were just like, we're just going to stand and take it. Um, and they took injuries, but they still beat it. And I'll be honest, I don't know that they would have done any better if they were really trying hard to like use their environment or use their speed. Um, they thought that, which is why they didn't bother to do any of that. But I also feel like that was true as the DM. All right. But I better sign off for now. Have a good